The settlement of New Meridian had stood for 3 standard years on the edge of contested space, a fragile bridge between human and Velkhori territories. The war had ended 6 months ago, but the wounds remained fresh, carved deep into both civilizations. Sergeant Marcus Webb had seen enough of those wounds. He'd lost friends to Velkhori plasma fire, watched entire squadrons vanish in the void. The ceasefire felt less like peace and more like an intermission, a collective holding of breath before the next act of violence. Still, orders were orders, and his posting to this backwater diplomatic outpost meant keeping the fragile peace intact. The morning started unremarkably. Marcus made his rounds through the settlement's perimeter, checking sensors and scanning for any anomalies. The dual suns of Kepler 442b climbed the rust-colored sky, casting long shadows across the prefabricated buildings. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind or the local fauna. A cry, distant, desperate, and unmistakably intelligent. Marcus's hand instinctively went to his sidearm as he moved toward the source. The sound led him beyond the settlement's edge into the rocky badlands where nothing should be. The terrain grew treacherous, jagged stones jutting from crimson soil like broken teeth, and there, camouflaged by shadow and stone, was the old mining well, a relic from the initial survey teams, abandoned and supposedly sealed. The cry came again, echoing from its depths. Marcus approached carefully, activating his wrist light as he peered over the crumbling edge. 60 feet down, maybe 70, a figure struggled in the darkness. The light caught Violet's skin, forearms grasping uselessly at smooth walls and the distinctive cranial ridge of a Velkhori female. His blood froze. A Velkhori. The enemy. She looked up, her 3 eyes wide with terror that transcended species. She said something in her chittering language, words he didn't understand but whose meaning was crystal clear. Help me. Marcus's mind raced through protocols. He should report this. Call for backup. Let the diplomatic corps handle it. The Velkhori had left humanity's colonies in ruins, had shown no mercy when humans begged for it. This could be a trap, a test, or worse. The woman cried out again, weaker this time. One of her arms hung at an unnatural angle. Marcus looked at his comm unit, then back down into the well. He thought of his training, his orders, the faces of friends who would never see home again. He thought of every reason to walk away. Then he jumped. The fall lasted forever and no time at all. He hit the water at the bottom hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. The well was deeper than he'd estimated, and the water was ice-cold, fed by underground springs. He surfaced, gasping, and immediately began treading water. The Velkhori woman stared at him with something beyond shock, incomprehension. A human, the enemy, had descended into hell itself to reach her. "It's okay," Marcus said, knowing she probably couldn't understand the words but hoping his tone would convey meaning. "I've got you." The walls were smooth, worn by centuries of water flow. No handholds, no ledges. The opening above was a distant circle of rust-colored sky. Marcus pulled out his grappling hook, aimed, and fired. The first shot missed. The second caught but pulled free. The third, the last charge in his device, caught and held. He turned to the Velkhori woman, who had pressed herself against the far wall, injured arm cradled against her chest. Fear radiated from her in waves. Marcus moved slowly, hands visible, making himself as non-threatening as a human could be to someone whose people he'd fought against for years. "We're getting out together," he said softly. "Do you understand?" "Together." She watched him for a long moment. Then, trembling, she extended one of her good hands. Marcus secured the safety harness around both of them, an awkward arrangement given her four-armed physiology and his too. The climb was brutal. The rope cut into his palms, the combined weight making every meter an agony. The Velkhori woman, whose name he didn't know, clung to him with desperate strength, her breath ragged against his shoulder. Halfway up, the rope slipped. They dropped 5 feet before the grapple caught again, swinging them hard against the wall. Marcus's shoulder erupted in pain, but he held on. The woman made a sound, half whimper, half something else, and her grip tightened. "Almost there," Marcus grunted, pulling hand over hand. "Stay with me." When they finally crested the edge, collapsing onto solid ground, both lay gasping in the twin sun's light. Marcus's muscles screamed, his hands bled, his shoulder throbbed. The Velkhori woman's 3 eyes were fixed on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She spoke then in halting, broken English. "Why, you jump? I am enemy." Marcus sat up slowly, looking at this being his people had demonized for years. Up close, he could see she was young, scared and very much alone, probably abandoned by her own people for some infraction he'd never understand. "I jumped," he said quietly, "because you needed help. And because—" He paused, searching for words that felt true. "Because maybe if we stop seeing enemies and start seeing people, this damn war actually ends." She stared at him for a long moment, then extended her uninjured hand in what might have been her species' gesture of trust or gratitude. Marcus took it. News of the rescue spread through both settlements like wildfire. Some called Marcus a traitor. Others called him a fool. The Velkhori response was mixed. Outrage from hardliners, stunned silence from others. But Ambassador Teklin, the Velkhori diplomatic representative, requested a private meeting with Marcus the next day. She came alone, a gesture of respect among her people. She looked at the human sergeant with her 3 eyes, then spoke in perfect English. "In our culture there is a concept, Velkhara, a debt that transcends law, politics, even war. You saved Carissa without hesitation, without calculation. You jumped into darkness for one of us." She paused, her neck crest rising in what Marcus had learned was respect. Humans are terrifying warriors. But this we did not expect. This changes things. 3 months later, the new Meridian Accords were signed, establishing the first joint human Velkhori colony. Carissa, her arm healed, stood beside Marcus during the ceremony, a living symbol of what the treaty represented. When asked by reporters why he'd risked his life for an enemy combatant, Marcus's answer was simple. "I didn't jump in for a Velkhori or for humanity. I jumped in for someone who needed help." Sometimes that's all that matters. In the halls of the Galactic Assembly, ambassadors and warlords would debate for years about what truly ended the human Velkhori war. They would point to treaties, trade agreements, and political maneuvering. But Carissa knew the truth. Peace didn't begin in assembly halls or on battlefields. It began 60 feet down in a forgotten well, when a human looked at the enemy and saw only a person in need, and made the simplest, most profound choice imaginable. He jumped.